Good afternoon, Greg.
Keith, it's good to see you again.
Well, we missed Tuesday 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah,
Now
yeah,
we're here. It's Thursday, and
right.
but it's another week, and we just have a shorter end to it than we had it when we do Tuesdays.
Yeah. This is fine. This is just fine. Sometimes that happens. We talked before with our schedules that sometimes things don't align perfectly on Tuesdays. So here we are on Thursday.
That's the beauty of being able to record, because it doesn't matter what day it is.
Regardless of the day of the week, we're ready to talk biz talk.
That's true. So, what's on your mind? What are you thinking about today?
Well, I was thinking about growth,
Okay. I'm
and I think
assuming
a
it's
lot.
business growth. Not we're too old to be growing anymore. So unless it's in the wrong direction. So
The, the only thing on me that's growing is my waistline.
exactly, that's what I mean.
No, I was thinking about business growth.
Okay.
And we get into I think we get to thinking about growth, and we think growth has to happen really fast and really quickly, or we're failing, right? If we're not getting super hyper growth, we feel like something's wrong.
So would you say that there's this sense of urgency that is self-inflicted?
Yes, yes, I would. I would say not, and maybe I would define it not not a sense of urgency, but almost to a point where, if we're not putting double digit growth up, we're somehow not being successful, or we're falling short. I think sense of urgency is a really good thing to have. I think having maybe unrealistic growth expectations can be a problem.
So you're the numbers guy. So I'm going to ask you a question. So where does the unrealistic growth uh, come from in terms of your own, you know, unreasonable, expectations?
Yeah, I think this is again something that I've seen kind of change over time. Um, I think in today's world where things are just moving so fast, that there's kind of this expectation that your business ought to be growing at sort of that same. Your business should be growing as fast as the world's moving, right? And in some
That's kind of,
and in some cases that can be true, right? But it's not going to be true all the time, because business just doesn't work that way. We hit plateaus from time to time. And I just think there's sort of this danger with thinking that we always have to be growing exponentially, and that maybe there's value in, kind of a slower growth model.
yeah. So, again, so you're the numbers guy. I'm the sales and marketing guy. So my brain goes to like, it's never fast enough.
I knew you'd say that.
And the desire for growth always in my mind was twofold. One is I knew I had to pay my bills. I know this wasn't where I had a job now and had a paycheck at the end of the week. So if I
Right.
didn't do enough business, it wasn't just about my paycheck. It was my employees' paycheck. It was the rent. It was the utilities. It was the vendors. I mean, all those things went into a P&L. For those who don't know, it's a profit and loss statement.
Right, or an income
But
statement.
but yeah, but you live off that when you build a business, and it's like, am I meeting my projected numbers? Because even when I was not that experienced, I understood the concept of debits and credits. It's money in, money
Mhm.
out. What's left?
Yeah,
And when you have negative cash flow, that goes into the next month. And if you have any working capital, it gets depleted. So The
Right.
desire to grow fast is I think is driven by need even more than desire. Would you agree with that?
I think that's an interesting. I think that's an interesting comment, that certainly there is need to grow. Okay. I have seen businesses that have grown though quite quickly, and that's actually run them out of cash. Right?
Yeah.
Because they're growing so fast, the need for cash, depleted their cash balance. They didn't have anything left. Even though they were growing, they were outrunning their bank account. Right? What's that?
Were those mostly receivable based businesses where
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
cash and carry, it's like it's net 30 or net 60, and if you're selling so fast and you're depleting your cash to buy and the money's not coming back fast enough, you got a cash flow issue.
It was not only that sort of a business, but also an inventory business. Right? So you had to build inventory. So you're using cash for inventory, and then you're financing receivables. And if those things start to stretch, a fast growing company, receivables are going to grow fast. You have to build inventory. And both of those are negative to the cash flow, right? I mean, putting receivables on the books is great, but until you collect it, it's not cash in the bank. And if you got slow paying clients, or that cash cycle starts to get stretched, it puts a lot of pressure on a company.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was in the business that was inventory intensive, but it was cash and carry. Now, I said cash and carry, I would sell it because it wasn't, unless it was a pair of sunglasses that were going out the door that day, I generally wasn't getting paid in full. Generally, I got a deposit between 25 and 50%. I usually delivered within 7 days or sooner, and I got the balance. So you're always sitting with a balance, and that's your receivables is what can kill you. And because I was a very aggressive salesman, I would sell people that weren't ready to buy. Okay, what did that mean? I have no money on me. I don't have my card. I got to come in with my husband. So I'm taking an order. Okay, and I've sold it with either nothing down or very little down. Now I got burned occasionally because either I went and I made the glasses and they said, yeah, it's fine. And then, the buyer's remorse happens when the husband yells at her or the wife yells at the husband, what did you do? And, we don't have that money. And it's like, but needless to say, I won more than I lost. Okay. But the fact is that even though I was in a somewhat cash and carry business, every month I was buying inventory, either for, because sometimes we'd sell out of inventory and you have to replace it. Okay, take it off the shelf. It's a popular item. Boom, it's got to go in your order book, and you're ordering. And you say, you know what? That's moving like crazy. Let's buy 5 of them, instead of 1.
Right.
Okay. Then all of a sudden the next month the bill comes in. Okay, and that's due. I would buy from buying groups, and buying groups you got discounts, but you had to pay on time. So,
right.
Fortunately for me, I became very friendly with the owner of the buying group, and he was very good to me. I mean, because I was growing like crazy. I was, so he would let me, stretch my payments.
Yeah.
But I mean, I became a little long-winded in this explanation, but the need for growth in my case, and every case is different, was I have to pay my bills, both personally and business. So I think what we're talking about is a little bit different here. It's almost a strategy that comes from, I don't want to say it's a scientific method, but it's like, okay, let's think about of going slow. What does that mean? Not leveraging ourselves. Let's not borrow too much money. Let's not expand too quickly. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a more thoughtful approach
Right.
that maybe allows you to, allow the roots of the business to take better, right? Like maybe by growing slower, you can develop customer relationships more deeply. Okay? And by doing that, again, in the long, I think we would all agree having strong customer relationships is valuable, right? You spoke about relationships with your vendors, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, those are relationships that I think sometimes we don't put as much value on because we're focused on our customer. But having strong relationships with our vendors, having partnerships with our vendors can be really critical, especially when there's a need, right? Maybe, like you said, you had a good relationship with that buying group. And sometimes having that good relationship might allow you to get extended terms, might allow you to get additional discounts of some kind, might allow you some kind of value that you wouldn't get if you weren't diving deep into that vendor relationship. And I think sometimes when companies grow fast, they don't develop those relationships, both on the customer and the vendor side.
Right. It's more of an impersonal
Yeah,
strategy. It's like it's all
yeah,
volume based. It's like
right,
not about anything except numbers. There's no
right,
commissions. It's like, yes, I want to put out a good product, but I need to sell 10,000 of them this month.
right.
So a couple of examples, in my research is, In-N-Out Burger. I think
Yeah.
most people have heard of In-N-Out Burger. I didn't
One of my
realize.
favorites.
Okay, so I didn't realize that they started in 1948. I thought it was something recent. Did you know they were around?
No, I did know they've been around for a long time. It's funny that was one of the companies that you came up with, just because I've always been a fan of In-N-Out Burger.
Yeah, so it's, I don't eat much in the way of burgers anymore. I mean, my kids were younger, we lived at
Yeah,
McDonald's and Burger King and places like, it was even before, it was even an In-N-Out Burger, where I lived. So they expanded cautiously. They did not, go into the mass franchise growth like a lot of the burger franchises did.
right.
Like McDonald's. Every year, I remember in the 70s, even the served our 1 billionth burger. It's like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
so, but that's again, without proper funding, it's very hard to manage a controlled or an uncontrolled growth, because
right.
once you go down that slippery slope, which I did by expanding rapidly without, a strong foundation, without strong funding. I don't even know how I did it, to be honest with you. I look back, it's like I should write a book on
Yeah.
insanity of over expansion. You know, it's like jumping out of a plane without a parachute.
Well, go back to your In-N-Out Burger example, because that's I probably live 1,000 miles from the closest In-N-Out Burger. They're mostly out west, right? So they haven't really grown nationally. They've kind of had their geographic location. They've kept their menu small. They haven't expanded into, chicken and other. They don't do breakfast. They really focus on just a small number of items that they're really good at, and they've developed because of that, I would say, or partly because of that, they've really developed a strong customer loyalty. Like people really love their In-N-Out burgers. The folks, right? Their customers are very loyal. And I got exposed to them just because when my kid was younger, he played traveling baseball, and we used to go out to Phoenix and Las Vegas and Southern California for baseball tournaments. And that's where we got exposed to In-N-Out Burger. And after the first time we went, every time we went back, my kid would say, we got to go to In-N-Out Burger at least once. Sometimes we were there 3 times in a weekend, you know.
Funny how important food becomes to you. You know, my youngest son loves PF Chang's.
Yeah.
That you have them by you?
Yep.
Okay. So when he was also playing travel baseball and we travel, you know, we went to a lot of different states. He would insist that we have to go to PF Chang's in every state we go to. I think we hit about 11 states with PF Chang's. So it's crazy, but you know, controlled growth as a strategy starts with, you know, a plan,
Yeah.
you know, and a certain type of personality. I really think you have to have that kind of a discipline, that you're going to pay attention to details and be so focused on the quality of your products, the quality of your service, your employee training. I mean, all the things that go into running a great business. And until you've really mastered all those different areas where you say that, okay, I can duplicate this.
Yeah.
You know, I have all the systems are in place, the strategies in place, the marketing's in place, the food, you know, how we make a burger, you know, how long do we cook it for, you know, what is the roll that we're using, you know, I mean to the such detail about every aspect of the business. And I until you've reached that or you've mastered that, I think it's very difficult to grow rapidly.
Right. Right. One of the things I really liked what you said, Keith, was about having those processes in place, because I think it's real easy for a company that does start to experience, you know, really kind of this exponential growth, is their processes maybe were okay at one time. Maybe they weren't, but maybe they were okay for a small business, but now they're getting up to, you know, they're 5, they're 10, they're $20 million in revenue. And those processes are no longer supporting that size of a business. And that's where I think, you know, having that controlled growth and allowing those processes to keep up with the business growth as opposed to outrunning your processes,
Yeah, and
can make a big difference in the long run.
Yeah, I agree, because I think so. If you mastered the processes for one store, you don't go open up 5 more. You
Right.
open up a second store and see if those same processes hold.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And and I don't know what the critical mass is of testing, you know, a process. You know, do you do 5 locations and see how it holds under 5 and say, okay, it's almost like, you know, like 2 kids is like having 3 or something. I mean, something like that. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's not just there's so many things that go into mastering something so that it could be duplicated over and over again.
Yeah. I think, you know, when you talk about that, like you open a second location of your business and you see, okay, do our processes now support having multiple locations, right? And if they do, then you can probably start moving more rapidly. But you're going to see by opening that second location what kind of issues are created. And you might say, you know what, we're not ready for location number 3 because we don't have location number 2 under control yet. We don't have the processes in place to manage multiple locations and multiple facilities. So that's, again, that would be a good time to say, hey, we need some controlled growth. You know, we need to put the brakes on here a little bit and make sure we have systems in place to support that next growth phase.
So, it's interesting because multiple location expansion didn't just happen, in the 70s and 80s. This has been from the beginning of time, of when
Yeah, yeah,
retailers build brands that were
yeah,
recognizable and established, and they said, okay, we're limited in growth to if we only have one location, let's expand, whether it's within the same city, whether it's in another state. So these methods have been, I'm sure, I'm not even guessing, success breeds success. So
yeah.
this is not, I mean, I'm sure they teach this, in business school. I mean, I had no formal business training, I learned as I went, but
Oh,
I'm
okay.
going to assume that the, uh, how to build a business, how to expand the business. I'm sure all this stuff is gone over with case studies of,
Yeah,
how did the Bell telephone expand and become nationwide? Well, they probably started I'm sure I read the story years ago, but I'm sure they were a local phone company, okay, that handled, the beginning of the telephone in some, small town. And they said, wow, this is working. Let's do it in the next town. Before you know it, they're in most of the towns, and everyone's using Ma Bell. And before you know it, they're in another state. The reason I'm talking about this is because there is a blueprint for expansion that I would say is, and there's always going to be differences, but I would say for sure that blueprint, no matter what the brand is that and company that expanded, followed a specific blueprint of success.
yeah, yeah. I would agree. I think, what's coming to mind as you're talking is, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie called The Founder. It's
Oh
about
yeah,
Ray Kroc.
oh it's great, oh, unbelievable.
It's one of my favorite movies about business.
Yeah,
But in the context of what we're talking about today, think of the difference between how Ray Kroc looked at growth and how the McDonald's brothers looked at growth.
yeah,
And you can make an argument that how the thing turned out, but the McDonald brothers really wanted this controlled growth, right? Maybe they were too far to that side of things because they didn't want to. They didn't really feel, at least in the movie, they were kind of portrayed as not wanting to take much risk. They didn't really want to expand all that much. They were kind of satisfied with something much smaller than what Ray had a vision for. But regardless of that, just think of the dichotomy there between kind of that slow growth model and what Ray Kroc ended up doing. Although Ray Kroc was absolutely he was dedicated to making sure that even though they were going to grow fast, they were going to grow in a way, the processes were going to be in place. And in fact, that's what impressed him the most about what the McDonald brothers did, was how they set up their restaurants.
but if you remember the scene with the malted machine,
Yeah.
okay, I mean, that was a differentiator at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Ray Kroc was a visionary,
Yeah.
okay, and the difference
Absolutely.
between a local operator and a visionary is they're so far ahead in their vision of where something that someone's already done well can be.
Right.
They just see it. There's something about their mindset. Mindset is the key. Is that, and he was a marketer.
Yeah.
McDonald's guys, they're great operators, great local operators. That they were able to build a process that worked, but they never saw themselves as like taking this brand throughout the country, throughout the world.
Right. Right. What's interesting about him, a little bit of a side note, is he wasn't a young man when he started
No,
McDonald's,
no,
and he wasn't particularly successful prior to that.
no. He was a
He
salesman.
was kind of a What's
out
that?
there selling, he's a salesman who's out there hawking. He might have been even the one selling the malting machines. I don't remember exactly what.
He was.
That was.
That's how he got to know them, was they needed more machines, and he couldn't understand why they needed more. So he drove out to see their facility out in San Bernardino. That's where McDonald's started. And he was just, in awe of what they were doing, right? Because the whole concept was, turning kind of restaurants on their head, right? Like most people back then, you always went to a restaurant and then you waited for your food after you ordered. Here was a place that you ordered and you got your food, within seconds, right? And there was no utensils, right? There was no plates, everything was disposable, right?
Brilliant concept. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
So it's so the real I guess the moral of the story is that expansion's not for everybody, that there is
right.
tremendous value in going slower. I'm gonna just use an analogy. You know me, I love analogies. If you wanted to bake a chocolate cake, you could always tweak the recipe, but there's certain
Mhm.
things you can't leave out.
Right,
Okay, otherwise you don't have a chocolate cake.
right.
So chocolate being one of those things. So, but if you're going to build a business, okay, and it's missing a key component in the process, you can't duplicate that because, well, chances are you're going to fail before you even get to a second location.
Right.
But everyone talk undercapitalization, a lack of training, lack of expertise in a specific area. I mean, all those things go into making a successful business. So I don't think it's just about going slow. I think going slow allows you to see where the holes are.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're not. I think what we're saying today, Keith, is we're not saying you shouldn't want to grow your business, but I think this discussion today was about, hey, it's okay to be really, really smart about how you grow your business to the point where you kind of slow down and make sure that you're making all the right steps, especially early on, because you really only get that one chance to, make that first impression, right? That start of that business. If you stub your toe and folks see something that they don't like, they're not apt to come back, right? So having that ability to making sure you're getting the foundation in place, right? Make sure you're getting the roots in place of your business. And that's going to allow, I think, growth to accelerate more in the future.
Definitely. So it's, of course, it always brings me back into the things I did well and the things that I wish I had done better. And most of it goes towards impatience. You could know the right thing to do, but impatience doesn't allow you to do it. It doesn't allow you. It allows you to do it, but the mindset is like, I need to go instead
Yeah,
of slow.
right.
I'm not. I don't like breaks. Yeah.
Well, again, this is what's a great discussion about this, is because you've been through this, and you can kind of take a look back and say, well, if somebody had told me that 40 years ago, I would have pushed them aside. And I think that's our whole point with kind of this discussion is, at least if a business owner is really thinking about how they're going to grow the business and at what speed, I think that's what's really critical. And again, it's going to be different for every business. But I think what we're both saying here today is that there might be times when you want to make sure you've really got the foundation in place to be able to grow fast. And we've talked before about, going slow to go fast. And this is kind of a closely related to that, but a little bit different discussion today
More
than we
detailed
had on that.
discussion about the
Yeah.
concept of going slow.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you know, the thing is, depending upon your mindset and your own vision, you may never have to move fast. Sometimes if you're just methodical, and there are
Mhm.
people that are very methodical about the process. You know, they had a job, they saw what worked, they saw the things they'd like to change. They go into business and they just follow a path. And they're not interested in going fast. They're interested in just doing it right.
Yeah.
You know, so it's very different mindsets. The people who, you know, want to just grow. And again, is it growth because you have a desire to have a lot of money, or is it growth because you like the feeling of like you've succeeded in a big way, or a combination thereof? There's a lot of different, you know, things that go into that mindset.
Well, and I think what we're talking about is, you know, I think it might be different for different owners, and it's got to align with your values as far as, you know, did you start your business because you wanted to grow rapidly? Or did you start your business because you had some other kind of something else that was really kind of triggering you to start this business? And having that, you know, I think if you're aligned with your values, you're gonna be much happier, number one. And it's just gonna feel right. And that's not to say one is better than the other. It just means it's gotta, again, different business owners are gonna have different values and what they're trying to accomplish.
You know, as you're talking, and I'm thinking at the same time about what you're saying, you know, a lot of my desire to grow fast was ego driven. You know, I was in an industry where the big players had franchises. So of course, where did my mind? Oh, I want to have my own franchise. I'll be bigger than all of them, and I'll be better than all of them. And you know, it's like, oh, so you don't have enough money to do this. It's like, well, you know, for better or for worse, I learned about leverage very early on. I was successful at, you know, borrowing money, and I wound up over leveraging, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
and through over expansion. There was no need for it. Absolutely no need. It was only my desire to to create a vision about who I was in the marketplace that I thought would propel my sales. You know, because people see, you have, you know, on in this town, the next town is an eye supply, you know. So it's like, so I had a lot of good thoughts about it from a marketing perspective, but the missing ingredient was I was undercapitalized.
sure,
You know,
sure.
and, I mean, and there was nothing worse than being undercapitalized when you've overexpanded. So,
Yeah, and that's, I mean, that's so true for so many companies, as we've talked before, and as I've run into business owners through my coaching business, that is a common denominator. That there's a lot of times where they didn't realize how much cash they were going to need to get their business up and running.
yeah.
Yeah,
So what's amazing to me is that you and I are coaches. Obviously, we coach different things, although we overlap in the things that we can talk about from life experience.
mm-hmm.
But I believe there's going to be an unbelievable growth in business coaching, because I think that what's happening is, one, everybody can be in business today. They
Right.
without a lot of capital, because
Yeah,
the digital world that we live in. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that they just need somebody that's been there, done that, that can help
yeah,
them grow,
yeah.
which is good for us. I believe.
And I think there's so many more business owners starting their own business at a much younger age.
Oh yeah.
You know, I think, you know, I'm assuming you were really an exception back when you started your own business, that you
I would
were,
say
you know, in
yes.
your 20s,
Yeah.
right? Today, it's not unusual at all to find somebody who's right out of college or didn't go to college and they're starting their own business and they're in their, they're in their early 20s.
Yeah, I definitely was driven. Okay, I mean, I had an unbelievable drive, which I still have today, except that I understand the perils of getting ahead of myself.
Sure.
So, it's still, I still know that you have to have the right amount of capital based on what the plan is. So, you say, well, what's the right amount of capital? Well, you don't start with the roof. Let's start with the foundation. What are you selling? What are the costs? Do you have inventory?
Yeah.
Do you need a physical location? What's the rent gonna be? What do you need to live on? Or can you, how much working capital do you have?
All of what you're talking about is a plan, right? And I think that's what we're talking about here as well, is making sure that you have a plan that aligns well with what you're trying to accomplish. And a plan for slow, methodical growth is going to look much different than a plan for accelerated growth.
No doubt about it. Because the numbers don't lie. Okay.
Right.
If you really focus on all the expenses that you're going to incur, including yourself,
Right.
the
Right.
equation, okay, you will come up with a pretty realistic number. And that tells you, one, can I do it at all?
Mhm.
Or two, if I can do it, okay, how long can I survive if I don't reach my projected numbers?
Right.
So,
Yep.
oh, I wish I knew them what I know now.
Well, that's why we're here, trying to teach folks that
Yeah,
are in your shoes, the same shoes you were in 40 years ago, to things to avoid and things to, sharing experience goes a long way in helping folks. So
well, that's what makes it fun for you and I, because
Yeah.
we've been there, done that,
Right.
and we have something to share that's valuable.
I
So,
think so.
all right, Greg, I think Thursday's almost over, and this was enjoyable. Good topic.
Yes, it was, Keith. Our discussions always are.
Yes, they absolutely are. Even if we don't know exactly what we're going to talk about, it always winds up being good. All right, Greg, until next week. Thanks.
See you, Keith.
Thanks.